Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. And my wonderful friend from down under is joining us all the way from Australia. And it is my friend, Marie Alessi. Hello, Marie.
Hey Gary, thank you so much for having me here.
Isn't it amazing that we could just converse all the way across the world like this?
I know, right? It fascinates me still, although I do this every week. But yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
So much fun. Well, I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, your intro, real quick. People know who we get to play with today, and then we'll
Sure,
get started. Um,
absolutely.
Everybody, we have Marie Alessi is a mother of two boys, a best-selling author, TEDx and keynote speaker. After her husband passed away from a brain aneurysm, she found and created her way back to joy. She instinctively knew it was the only way, the path worthy of her young boys. Her husband had taught her the concept of two choices, and this one was made in Rob's honor to make him proud. Marie has become a shining example of choosing love over fear and sadness. In her keynote, Marie shares about the power of grief. Her mission is to change people's perspective on how to address such a heavy topic and bring more lightness into grief. And we appreciate that because those of us who've been down the dark rabbit hole of grief, like so many of us have,
It's,
we
yeah,
could sure use lightness, right?
absolutely. It's a rather heavy topic for most people, and I really made it my mission to bring more lightness into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as I warned you, I only have one question. It's
Da-da-da-da.
because
Drum
we're the
rolls,
What If
please.
You Could podcast. I always ask my
Yeah.
guests, right out the gate, gosh, do you have a what if you could moment or what if you could thought for our guest?
Yeah. I have so many, so I'm gonna choose three quick ones, and because I think they sort of cover everything. So they cover as me as a mom, of course, I would always say, what if I could keep my sons happy and safe forever? You know, there is this moment when you have experienced adversity, when you have experienced loss, that this becomes a very real moment for you, where you're like, I wish I could keep them safe forever, which you can't, of course, but that's the Wish You Could podcast, right?
Yeah.
What if I could, in a business sense, for me, would be heal the world from grief. There's so many people still stuck in this, you can't heal grief, grief will stay with you forever. We'll go through that in the podcast. I have a very different opinion on that. And the what if you could, I had a third one and it slipped my mind, but maybe it will come back to me. But I'll stay with those two for now because, the personal and the business side are covered with that. And I merge them every day, all day long. The being a mom, being a business person, but it's all heart centered what I do. So yeah, I want people to be happy.
Yeah, yeah. And you can be happy. You can be happy.
Yeah.
I don't know, and we'll chat about it, but I don't know if you
Mm.
get over grief, but you get through grief, and on the other
Mm.
side of that can be light and happiness and a new life. It can be there, right?
Yeah. I'm going to dive straight in from what you just said there, Gary, because that in itself is already the starting point of shifting perspectives or changing a narrative of grief, like I like to say, because it's the whole, do you get over grief? No, it's not a call. Do you get through grief? Everybody chooses to do this differently. Some people get through it. Some people just try to shy away from it, which is hard. Some people say you have to address it. Other people say you can wait. Everybody's got a different opinion, and interestingly enough, the loudest opinion come from those who haven't actually experienced it. So um, in my background, I have experienced very deep loss or grief twice in my life. I have seen a lot of people pass in my life, but two were really, really intense for me. The first one was my dad when I was 20, and the second one, my husband, when we were 45. So very different experiences, two absolutely different experiences. When my dad passed, I had no idea how to deal with it. I was completely at a loss, literally, and felt very, very unsupported. So then when Rob passed, and I'm talking that is like, I never did the math, how many years later? 26 years later. 26 years later, basically, or 25 years later, I knew that I didn't want my boys to go through that same experience that I had. And they weren't even combined as old as I was when they lost their dad. They were 10 and 8. So I knew I wanted them to have a different experience. And I'm going to wrap this up with I'm really, really grateful that Rob and I had the what if conversation. You know, the what if you could? We had that conversation, which is really interesting that we speak about this on this podcast now. What would you do if, you know, if something was to happen to me, to you, and the outcome in a nutshell was I would want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. Because that's what love is. Love just wants you to be happy. So yeah,
Yeah. I know. I mean, there's just so many definitions and so many ways through, and so many, you know, mostly it just needs to be talked about, right? I mean,
absolutely.
however
Yeah,
you define it, however you want to place something on it, like, people talk about the 5 steps of grief, which was never meant to be what people have put it out there,
yeah,
right? It was never
yeah.
meant to
Thanks for
go in
saying
that
that.
direction.
Yeah.
But it is still something that is just hidden in the shadows for some reason. We don't know how
Mm,
to touch on it, right?
yeah. It's like people treat it as if it was contagious. You know, when you talk about it, it confronts people with the idea of their own mortality. And we all know it, but we don't want to know it. We don't want to think about it. In other words, we'd rather be here, which is great, than thinking of our ending one day and how fast that could come, how quickly that could come, how surprisingly that could come. I think that's what scares people the most. So when people die at an old age, it is normal and expected. And when people die at a young age, like Rob did, and like my dad was 46, Rob was 45, very, very young age, completely unexpected. That's what people get scared because that's what makes them realize this could actually happen to me as well. Because you always think that, you know, even when Rob and I had the conversation, a what if conversation, it was theory, right?
Yeah.
Neither of us thought that it would actually happen. When Rob talked to me about life insurance, I was like, babe, we don't need that, you know. And I'm glad he insisted because he's like, I want you to be safe if something was to happen to me, and vice versa. We've got kids now, we do need to think about it. And I'm glad that he had his head screwed on like that because I was always the one thinking safety, but with life insurance, I'm like, oh, come on, you know, we're not going to need that. So there are a couple of things that I think are really, really important. If you just take a couple of things away from this podcast, it's definitely have the what if conversation, you know, or I would actually prefer to say these days that even if, because the what if always comes from a space of fear, that even if is more like life embracing and the more, you know, coming from a space of love, even if something happens to me, I still want you to be happy. I still want you to enjoy your life and, you know, jump around and party. And I don't know, like, I think it's important to have that conversation and also the financial side of things. I've worked with literally thousands of people now over the last 6.5 years to date. And there are so many stories of people who didn't have their finances sorted. So every time I hear that, I bless Rob 1,000 times over that he insisted and said, no, 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 we do need this, you know, no matter what. So, yeah.
Yeah, and this with April, when April passed, it was 10 years ago last month, 10 years
Mm,
ago on December 8th. And so she had cancer, so we had 2 years of her going through it to kind of prepare, I guess. You don't really
yeah.
prepare, but I mean, you see it coming. And then
Yeah.
she was 46 also. And then if there's
Mm,
a sudden loss, there's that kind of shock on it. And I deal with a lot of people who pet loss. I mean, there's
mm,
so many different types of loss and so many types
yeah.
of grief and how we get through them. But boy, that sudden one is really tough. And was
Yeah.
Russ, it sounds like Russ was more of a sudden loss.
Rob, yeah, he had a brain aneurysm, so there was no pre-warning at all. He flew on a business trip and didn't make it back. So it was literally he collapsed in a shower and died. That was a split second. And I think the shocking part for us was like there is no pre-warning. And I always say I don't even want to compare this because my dad passed from cancer and it happened very, very fast. So from he was actually in remission and when the cancer came back, from the day he was told till the day he died was exactly 1 month. So that was really fast, you know. So people always think when you know up front you have time to prepare, but not really. And I don't think it makes it easier at all.
Yeah.
And sometimes the knowing makes it harder. Sometimes it makes it easier because you can talk about things. There is no right or wrong. There is no, oh, this was great because in death, you know, it's just I think it is more in the living really in the how do you prepare for life? Because when you are prepared for life, when you're in the now, when you're embracing life, then you deal with death completely differently. I think the answer really lies in how do we prepare for now, for living, for embracing life and really celebrating it. I want to bring one quick thing in here that I call the irony of grief. And for me, that is when people actually stay stuck in grief, it is because they feel like I can't get past this because they are so stuck in this. I lost my person. You know, they are stuck in that closed door moment, staring at the closed door, not being able to look at all the other open doors around you. And when you reduce it to that, it is always because people are so, but this life was so much for me. This life was worth so much for me. This life, that person that passed. What about your life? You're still here. And now you're doing exactly that, what you wished you had for your person, and completely shatter it or ignore it or neglect it. Why don't you do exactly that, what you wished your person had? This to me is the most beautiful way of honoring Rob, that I take our boys and create the happiest life possible because that's what we promised to each other. Because that's celebrating life, that's honoring their lives and living ours to the fullest. That's
You know.
my belief.
So important because, like I tell people all the time, and the people who knew my past wife, April, they'd say, April would kick your
Mm.
butt if she knew that you were still wallowing in this stuff,
Oh yeah,
because that's just not
same
how
with
we
Rob for
lived as a
sure.
family, right? We were together
Mm.
28 years. We got together very, very young, had the boys travel
Mm.
all over the world. We had a great
Wow.
life, a really great life. I
Yeah,
mean, and so she would
that's
be like,
awesome.
dude, get your big girl
Exactly.
pants on and let's go because she was one tough Colombian woman, all right? She didn't take crap from
Yeah,
anyone.
love it.
But you're
Mm.
right. I mean, if that person meant so much to you in life,
Mm.
then they should mean that much to you in death that that they would
Absolutely.
want you to continue to be happy because you can't
Yeah,
go back and fix what happened. Right? So why
yeah,
ruin years of your life? I mean, you and I both know people are 10, 15, 20, 25 years into someone's passing and they're still in the same spot.
yeah. And it is also because of what society teaches us. They think that's their way, how they show how much they love the person. And it happens all the time that people always say, oh, grief and love, it's the same side, it's the same side of two different sides of the same coin or something like that. And no, 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 no. Grief is grief, love is love. Yes, they often happen together and they can go hand in hand for quite some time. Because if I hadn't loved, then I wouldn't grieve. I totally get that part. But they are two different things. And to me, I love telling this little story about grief and joy. I started telling it as a little story when I started doing family bereavement sessions for kids because they can relate to that a lot more. But I think it's just as beautiful for adults. Where I always talk about the three girlfriends always hanging out together, and then one was spending way more time with this one and the other one got jealous and then I reveal at the end that was grief. So all of a sudden I start hanging out with grief all the time and joy got really jealous because I was hanging out with grief, but then sometimes we play together and da da da, and the story goes on till joy now lives with me permanently. We become housemates, but grief is the one who comes to visit every now and then, and it's absolutely fine. When she comes in, we tell stories from the past. Sometimes we cry together, sometimes we laugh together, and sometimes Joy goes to the markets while Grief is visiting because she doesn't want to bear with her. So I tell this story all the time and it works so well because this is really how I look at grief. Grief is something that comes to visit, and sometimes it comes often, more regularly, and other times not at all. And that's fine. And when I have time, I allow her in, I sit with her. Other times we sit in the bathtub together and sob together, and that's fine too. But she doesn't move in anymore. She doesn't live here anymore. Joy lives with us on a permanent basis, and that's fine. So I just treat it differently. I don't think that grief stays with you forever. It is definitely something that happened in our lives for our past, and that fact will be there forever. Yes, absolutely. Um, but it certainly doesn't mean that we can't live a joyful life because that's exactly what I would want for him if it was the other way around.
Yeah,
It's called love.
yeah.
That's
Except I
love.
always tell I'm remarried. We've been
Hmm.
married now for 3 years. We found a new wonderful young
Congratulations.
lady, and I tell her all the time, "Hey,
Mhm.
if I die, I don't want you happy. No, 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 no. I want you to suffer like I have." don't be going happy on me. All right? I'll
For
be
people like you, I rephrase it to what would love do? Not what would Gary want for you, what would love do?
right. you know,
Oh, I love
but
it.
I kid. No, I tell her
Oh
I've
no.
gone through my crazy stuff with my cancer and heart
Yeah.
disease. But guilt
Hmm.
weighs so heavy on us,
Hmm.
some of us grievers, right? It's like,
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
why her and not me? And why should I
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
happy
Yeah.
if she's not here? You know what I mean? We carry this guilt.
Mm.
And to
Yeah.
me, that's the stupidest one of the stupidest ones, right?
Mm.
It's like, oh,
Yeah.
for heaven's sakes, right? How could you be
Roll its
guilty? You
eyes.
did not give your spouse cancer. You did not give them
Yeah.
an aneurysm. You
Yeah.
didn't you do
Yeah.
the car accident. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Guilt's the one that I'm always the least, I don't want to say least sympathetic about, but the one that I'm just like,
Mm.
guys, honestly, you
Yeah.
didn't give your spouse cancer. You didn't, I mean,
Mm.
you really cannot be guilty for that. They're gone and you're not. It just doesn't, it's not a
Yeah.
sensical thing. It's a touchy topic, though.
I think it's also like a lot of people struggle with guilt in a different sense that they say, I wish I had. I wish I had said this. I wish I had done that. I wish I didn't say this. I wish I didn't do that. There's all these things where people feel guilty for the lost opportunities, for, or for taking opportunities that they shouldn't. And I always say to them, guilt is an earthly emotion. It's a human emotion. On the other side, that doesn't exist, because on the other side, for me, I know everybody's spiritual beliefs are very different, but for me, the other side is purest love. There is no space for guilt or grief. There is just love. And when you think about that, and when you really allow yourself to be infused by that, there's no space for your guilt either. Like, who does it help? I often talk about when it comes to grief, and pardon me using the coaching lingo here for a moment, but there's something that coaches call secondary gain. So, in other words, if you hold on to grief or guilt, let's go with guilt in that case, it works for everything really. Whatever you hold on to that doesn't serve you, what do you get out of it? And usually I get like a, huh? And I'm like, no, seriously, think about it. What do you get out of it? Why do you still hold on to it? Because your husband doesn't, your wife doesn't, whoever passed over doesn't. They have let go of that in their passing over, because there is no space for that on the other side. This truly is a human emotion. It's not a spiritual emotion, not at all. So the only spiritual emotion there is love. Just go with that for a moment and then think again, why are you holding on to it? To me, there is often this, when you think of a tug of war and people are holding on and both are pulling on that rope, it just really causes a lot of friction and hurt in your hands after a while. So just consider yourself when you're holding on to grief or guilt or any of those emotions that don't serve you, you still tugging on a rope where the other person has long let go. Like, why why don't you just let go? And that brings me to the next. Sorry, I'm jumping around here for a bit, and I'll make that one really, really short, because the letting go is a huge, huge concept that I struggled with for pretty much like 3 decades, until I had a huge epiphany about it. And the letting go is not what you want to focus on. Like, because I was the one saying, like, how do I just let go? Just and let go in one sentence. It doesn't make sense to me. How do you just let go? Like, you don't just let go. You just focus on what you want in life. What do you want to see? What do you love? What makes you happy? What brings you joy? What lights you up? What makes your kids happy? What makes you jump around and dance? The more you think about that, everything else will drop off. There was something I had to let go of. Oh, I have already. Like, when you come to that moment, that's when you realize how simple it was, because you stopped focusing on it. You only ever focus on what you want to see in life, to experience in life. That's the secret. Only took me 3 decades to learn. You got it
Yeah.
in 30
And
seconds.
the lightness is a great thing to focus on, right? Not the darkness, not
Uh-huh.
the thing.
Mm.
What would you treat fear the same way as the guilt? Would you treat fear of letting go of this? You meet some people
Mm.
that like have a fear that's it's almost their cloak. It's almost their identity
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
I can't let go of this grief because
Mm-hmm.
it's who I've become now.
Yeah.
And it's a really kind of
That, oh my
interesting
God, yeah,
phenomenon, right? When you see that.
it is. I am so grateful that you said it, Gary. That's a really big thing because I see a couple of people out there, and I don't want to mention names because to me it almost feels like a judgment when I if I would mention their names. I just want to stay with the concept of it. There are a lot of people out there where grief has become their identity. And then it is about the widow this and the widow that. I really heavily dislike the label widow. I don't, it doesn't really suit me at all. I don't feel or think that I am like a typical widow. I actually did my TEDx talk that you mentioned in the bio. I did that about redefining our image of the widow because I really didn't like that label. So that was my topic. But I think it is, some people want to help others, which I think is beautiful. And I did the same thing. I, for 5 years, had a group called Loving Life After Loss. So, yes, there's the loss, but for me, the focus was always on the loving life after. You know, that was where I had my focus, and that's what I reminded people of when they were in my group. And in those 5 years, I've taken about 5,000 people on their healing journey. So that was massive. You know, it was a really beautiful movement. And eventually, I had to step away from it because I felt like I couldn't hold that space anymore. That was huge space that I held on a daily basis. And due to the time differences, there was never a break. People were up all night. And with a topic like that, you don't want to say, oh, you just told me about someone's suicide, but sorry, I'm out of office hours. You know, you don't do that. You are there, you hold space, you help. And I got so close to burnout so many times I had to step away. So the reason why I'm sharing this is because I have met so many people in there where the being the widow has become more that their identity than helping other widows through that. And then they're remarried and they see their husband like a little puppy dog next to them, you know, following her along as she's still talking about her grief and how sad she is. And I'm like, oh, I understand more than anyone that grief and loss and love and all of that can really happen simultaneously. It can happen all at the same time. Yet when I'm remarried, I don't want to be out there talking about how sad I am. I want to be out there helping other people get to joy as well. Absolutely. I wouldn't change my topic. I would still want to help people through grief. But there is a fine line of respecting your past husband and respecting your current husband or wife, whatever, you know. I think you get it more than anyone, but there are some people out there that might not really get that fine line and step over all the time. And I watch them and I think, I wonder how her husband feels about that, you know. And I understand how judgmental that sounds. Yet you can make your identity about being a widow, or you can make your identity about helping people get to joy. It's the exact same work that I'm doing. It's the labeling and the perspective that changes. And I'm very big on perspective and labeling. That's the whole work that I do.
I love it. And
Reframing.
there's no judgment here at all. Our conversation is
Yeah.
just open about what we've experienced, what we experienced with
Yeah.
the people, what we're moving on, but it's not nothing about judging anyone. And I glad you
Yeah.
said that because it's not. But you know, a lot
Yeah.
of times, you know, it's exhausting carrying that
Hmm.
mantle of grief. You know, it can be
Yeah.
exhausting. And
Yeah.
touching the new husband, new wife thing, because I am
Hmm.
on both sides of it, you know, took
Yeah.
me a long time to be accepting to want to meet someone else
Hmm.
because I didn't want to drag my dead wife into the relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
just not fair. Now, I did date a young lady who absolutely despised my dead wife. She was jealous of her.
Mm.
She didn't like how
Mm.
adjusted and awesome my boys were. She didn't like our past life. It was a really bizarre thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you never even met her. How come you don't, or Samantha?
No. And
Like,
jealousy doesn't work in any relationship. You know, it doesn't
yeah,
matter if it's a
dead
wife
or
that has
alive.
passed or if it's a previous relationship. You know, if you are jealous of somebody you're not with anymore, I get that it's different when somebody has passed because you didn't leave her because you didn't want to be with her anymore. You know, that's a huge difference. And it takes a very special person to see the difference and to be okay with that because, you know, she's not there to interfere with your relationship. It's the other person who makes that happen, not you. Well, it could be, but you know what I mean. That's why it's
I
important
get
that
what
you're
you mean.
ready. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be ready for a relationship. And if you are, and then somebody else comes in who's not, then It's their problem, not yours.
Yeah. And you know,
Yeah.
and I used to say is you're not competing with anyone, you
Mm,
know.
mm,
My current wife, that was one of the first things she said was she goes, I can't compete with April. And I said,
mm,
well, no one asked you to. My boys don't
mm.
want you to be their mom in that
Yeah.
capacity. You're going to be
Yeah.
their new mother-in-law, or
Yeah.
mom, whatever the term is.
Yeah. Stepmom. Yeah.
I'm not
Whatever.
going to compare you to her. I'm not marrying her. I'm marrying you. You're
Yeah.
completely different people. Trust me, you're way different. But this is
Yeah.
where I am in my life, and this is what I'm looking for in my life. I didn't ask
Mm,
my wife to pass away. Be on our
yeah.
38th, year
Yeah.
together.
Well.
But I'm not expecting you to be her, right?
Mm,
So we both kind of had things we had to work
yeah.
through. She
Very
had to
important.
be open to the fact that I'm not comparing you and please let that go. And I had to be able to let it
Mm,
go to the extent
yeah.
where I could let a new person in.
Yeah, you raised something very important there, though, because I think it is the most important thing in in a relationship per se is conversations. You know, like to really communicate in a productive way, in a connecting way, and with that topic, it is like double that importance, I would say. You know, you really have to keep those, um, these paths of communication open to really share about your emotions. Like, what does that trigger in you? You know, how can, because there will be triggers, no question asked, and people often say to me, are you ready for another relationship? Because I was in one relationship after Rob passed away, and that was only for 14 months. And there were certain other reasons why I walked away, and that was healthy for me. But there were also really, really beautiful reasons why I stayed there, and that was also very healthy for me, So I made my right decision at the right time, I would put it that way. And I haven't really been in a relationship since, and that's been a bit over 4 years now. So people keep asking me now, are you ready for a new relationship? Are you ready for a new relationship? And I'm like, I am absolutely certain I am. And I also know that when I will be in a new relationship, that there will be triggers coming up that I can only deal with when I'm in a new relationship. There's only so much that you can heal in theory. There's only so much that you can heal on your own. And then there are other layers that will come in when you start a new relationship where triggers might happen. And then with the right partner, you can look at those triggers. And obviously, you and I both had relationships after our significant partners passed away where it wasn't the right partner to go the length with that. And that's okay too. We have those experiences and we learn from that. And I really feel they come in as okay, there was another layer to be healed, and I look at that. And there were beautiful things as well. Like I know this short relationship that I had after our past, it was a huge contribution to my healing, absolutely big for me. And now I'm like, all right, bring it on, universe, just in case you're listening. I know you are. I am ready for a new relationship, but I'm also very aware that it will have to be with an open heart, with an open communication. It takes the right person to hold space for these topics to come up. And not everybody has the capacity or the spiritual maturity to deal with something like that. And they're just not my person, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up 2 points that make me think about it. I mean, one is, you know, how long do you wait after passing? I made a massive crash and burn mission. I got engaged 4 months after my wife passed. Four
Yeah.
months, yeah. And
Hmm.
people weren't mad at me, which is shocking. They were horrified at the girl who accepted the engagement. They're like, his wife of
Really?
28
Wow.
years just died. Are you insane?
Yeah. Mm.
Obviously, we didn't get married. And
Obviously. I
and
love
but we're
it.
still good friends. I adore her. We're
Mm.
still friends
Yeah.
actually 10 years later because she's an amazing person and but it
Hmm.
wasn't the time. So, there's a question of how long do you wait to get back in the relationship? But also,
Yeah.
I mean, how long did it take you after Rob passed to start seeing this? It's time to get into lightness. It's time to let
Mm.
move through this, move
Wow.
along this.
Ooh,
How
I've
long did that take?
goosebumps. So which one do I answer first? I think the first one is easier to answer because the answer is how long is a piece of string? You get into a new relationship when you feel you're ready. And if that's 4 months after or 17 months after, because that's when it was for me,
Right.
or 3 years after, nobody can answer that question but your heart in that very moment. That's nothing that you can think about before. You see that person, and all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I'm ready. You'll just know. And there was nothing that I thought through. If you would have asked me beforehand, I would have never thought that 17 months after Rob's passing, I would get into a new relationship. Wouldn't have thought that. But when he was there, and I just knew.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, what was the other question? I just lost it now.
Just, I mean, how long before you started, from the time Robert
Oh,
to you
yes, the
started trying to
lightness.
work
The lightness.
through and
Yeah.
find this lightness and start with the books and the talks? I mean, you're doing
Mm,
so much to help
mm,
people,
thank you.
but
Yeah.
initially you had to help yourself before you can start doing
Yeah.
this, or maybe you did them together. I mean, but
Mm,
what was that
yeah, I
spark
did.
where you go, I need to get
So,
this done?
yeah, thank you. The answer is almost immediately. I still remember the moment I received the phone call from the sergeant from the coroner's office, and there was the most incredible, you can put that in a negative or positive way, I leave that up to the listeners. The most incredible bilingual brain moment for me, because I grew up in Austria, so my mother tongue is German, but English has certainly become my heart language. It's my go-to. It's I've been living in Australia for over 20 years. But when the sergeant rang me and introduced himself as a sergeant from the coroner's office, I was still hanging on like, yeah, and I had
Right.
never heard the word coroners before, so I didn't know what that meant, luckily. So that gave me that weird slow motion delay moment of that message before it hit me. And like we're talking seconds here, but those seconds, the split seconds, were hugely important to me to actually, get hit by this wave. And when he said those words, I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning. That was the exact sentence. I'll never forget that. It was so surreal, absolutely surreal. I'm like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And then I had literally 7 steps from my bedroom down to the living room where the boys were sitting, 10 and 8, in their martial arts uniform. And that was the moment. That's why I'm answering the question this way. I had the 7 steps down to prepare a message that you cannot sugarcoat. Your dad just died. You cannot sugarcoat this message. You have to say it out straight. And I remember asking them to put their iPads down. I remember taking their hands and looking at them. And just by the way I talked to them, there was no 5 more minutes. They put their iPads down. They looked at me. We held hands. I told them the message. They started screaming. They fell apart. I hugged them. We cried. There was this whole whirlwind or tidal wave, I should say, of emotions that came over us. And I just stood in that storm and I held them. I just held them. And I remember while I was holding them, I had Rob's voice in my head from the conversation 3 years prior. I want you to create the happiest life possible for the boys and you. That I'm getting emotional just saying that, but that came to me in that very moment. And in that very moment, I knew my direction. I had my North Star. I had no idea how to get there, but I had my North Star. And that's when it started in the very first moment. And only weeks later, literally a couple of weeks, it was not long after Rob passed, I was upstairs in the bedroom where I received that call. And I had this, what I now call a spiritual epiphany. It was a real epiphany where I'm like, wow, it hit me all of a sudden. I was like, Rob and I have chosen this. I still get goosebumps now all over my back when I say that. Rob and I have chosen that. This was our soul contract. And it took me a whole lot longer to be able to actually share that with other people, let alone talk about it on a podcast now. But now it's completely normal to me. But in the first moment, I was like, oh my God. There was this wow moment of, I was so in awe of the path that he has chosen in that. There was gratitude. There was a little bit of sadness as well. But there was this absolute magnificent spiritual experience of recognizing that we have chosen that on a soul level. That's what we have chosen to experience here in our human experience. And that gave me so much love
Mm.
and power to get through this and strength to hold space for the boys and show them a very different path to what society suggests. So there have been ongoing little and big signs from Rob along the way that, yeah, that really added to that spiritual epiphany.
What were you doing in your life? Were you a homemaker? Did you stay home with the kids? Did you have a business? What were you doing in your life before this
Yeah,
event happened?
all of the above in a different order. So I was actually working in corporate in advertising before we had a family. When I was pregnant with Flynn, our first son, I left the advertising world because I knew you can't combine that success in advertising and being a successful mom, as in successful in being there for them, doesn't work together. So I left advertising. Then I was at home for about 4 years because we had planned for that. We had saved and planned ahead for me staying at home for the boys until they were old enough for preschool. So when they were 4 and 2, or just close to, I started my own business and I started working from home. I worked around their sleep times. I started a coaching business and I started off with moms going back to the workforce. So it started
Mhm.
off with transitioning moments for people. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I started working with business owners. And it was always working on personal growth to achieve business growth. So it was always this transitioning into something bigger, into your next new version. Did a bit of relationship coaching on the side as well. But it was always mindset based. So all that 7.5 years of mindset coaching really gave me such a beautiful base to stand on when I received the news about Rob's passing, because then I had all these tools that I now needed to apply to myself. And that was really helpful, I have to say. I didn't
Isn't
have
that
them when my dad had
interesting?
passed.
Isn't that interesting how the universe works that way?
Absolutely. So many times I look back, I'm like, okay, this is all making sense now. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, because you had
amazing.
basically, like you said, built the foundation to go
Mm,
from one sort of counseling, teaching, helping to
yeah,
another with already a built-in mechanism of
yeah,
not just the mechanics of it, but also mentally of what you were
yeah.
doing. Yeah, we did the same thing with our boys. I mean, we own a real estate company, and it's like, all right, you stay
Hmm.
home and let's you be a full-time mom. And when you're ready
Yeah,
to jump back in, but
yeah.
until then, let's try to do you raise the boys. I don't want to say a traditional
Mm.
household, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
You did the same
yeah,
thing.
it is
It's
traditional,
good for
and
mom to be
there's
home when
such
the boys.
beauty in there as well. Like I really appreciated that I had that, and I often thought Rob and I actually wanted to, because in Europe where I grew up, it is quite more and more the norm that dads can take up time as well and be the stay-at-home dad, which I think is so beautiful. Because what a blessing is that when a dad can have the time to really bond. And Rob and I actually talked about that, and we were so close to doing the all right, let's do 4 days, 3 days. He can work 4 days and then I work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And we work the family time around it because we don't work all day anyway. So
Yeah, yeah.
we had this plan, but then in the very last minute where everything was standing already, his big boss pulled the plug and said, no, no, can't do that. You can't do you have to be in the office for 5 days. And I remember it felt like somebody pulled the rug underneath my feet because I'm like, but I was so looking forward to that and I needed it for my sanity. And I still remember I was talking about it and he was disappointed because he was looking forward to
Yeah,
taking on that role. And Rob was such a hands-on dad, so
yeah.
hands-on, really hands-on husband, hands-on dad. It just is very, very rare that you see that. And people always say, like, oh my God, he was so blessed. Like, and the wives sometimes bitching about their husbands, they always look at him as like, you wouldn't understand, you've got Rob. And I'm like, you say to him as if it was something bad. I love that he's like that, where other people roll their eyes at him. I'm like, I so appreciate it.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
Yeah, well, that's
yeah.
where we
Can
were
I just
blessed
ask you
because
something?
yeah, we had,
Sorry.
having the real estate company, you could,
Yeah.
you set your appointments around where you can set them, and
Yeah,
you make sure you're there for the
absolutely.
soccer games and all the
Yeah.
events. So yeah, we were a real tight unit of four, and I was fortunate that I could make the time to
Mm,
be with the boys. And but
yeah.
you're a boy mom. There's a special
Yes,
place
I
in
am.
heaven for boy moms, right?
Yeah, mom of your boys. I love it. To ask you quickly, Gary, do you mind me asking how old your boys were when your wife passed away, when April passed?
Well, they were older than your boys. So
Yeah.
Zachary would have been 19
Hmm.
and Christopher would have been 20 when they passed away. And
And how old were
unfortunately,
they?
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Go ahead.
I just
No.
wanted to also know how old were they when you remarried?
So Zachary would have been, what was it, 6 years? So Zachary would have been about 26, and
Hmm.
Chris would have been about 27 because they're 16 months
Hmm.
apart. Um,
Hmm.
and they absolutely adore my new wife. They're just like, Dad, I don't know
Thank
how
you.
you did it,
There's
but you
hope.
picked, yeah, you picked the perfect one. They adore her. They
Yeah,
just absolutely
love
love
it.
her because
Beautiful.
she's just a solid person. But but I remember that when she passed, it was a little bit different than yours. I was with her. I was living in the
Mm,
hospital with her when she passed.
yeah.
But we had sent our son to go stay with a friend in Italy just to get him away from the
Mm,
stress. We had no idea she was going to
yeah.
pass. The doctor didn't,
Yeah.
usually in cancer, they go, well, you got a month
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
got 3 months,
Yeah.
right? I don't know if your father got the countdown after the second diagnosis. Did they tell him after the second
He
diagnosis?
got it. He got it at the first diagnosis,
Oh, wow.
and they said, he's fine. I can go because I went to Italy. Isn't that so bizarre? Also Italy, and I wanted to spend New Year's in Italy with a close friend, and I'm talking only 5 days. And I was so worried about my dad. Something happened, not him passing, but something happening while I was away. And I talked to the doctors, like, no, he's fine, he's fine, he's fine. As soon as I was in Italy, he got put into ICU and said, "There's no way home." But
Ah,
he did make it out. Complete miracle. The doctors were like, there was no way that he could have survived that, and he did for another year. And then, yeah, I don't know if my dad ever got the countdown in the second one. If he did, he didn't tell me.
yeah. Yeah, they never,
Mm.
it's just bizarre. I know almost everyone I know who's passed from cancer, the doctor said, you've got X
Yeah,
number, right? So they did.
yeah.
So when we sent to
Mm.
Christopher to Italy to go stay with our friend, we just thought we were getting away from the stress because Zach was already away. He was in the
Mm.
service, so he was already living
Mm.
in Texas or Missouri. No, I think it was Missouri
Yeah,
at the time. So
yeah.
he wasn't around to see her suffering, and I just wanted to get
Mm.
Chris away for a little while, so he's not wallowing in the suffering of his mom.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
boy, but she passed when he was in Italy, and they
Mm.
still are mad at me about it, like I did it on
Mm.
purpose. But when like you
Yeah,
said, you got to sit with your boys,
that's a
say,
tough one. Yeah.
guys. But so I don't know which one's easier, which one's better, right?
Mm.
Calling your someone and saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, this person has died," or being
Mm.
there with them. I don't know which is better.
Yeah.
It's so hard that
Oh,
moment.
I don't think there is a better or easier or whatever. This is always hard, no matter what, if they're here or overseas. It is such a tough message to convey. And for me, yes, of course, it was easier for me, I should say that, to be there with them and hold them. I can't imagine at that age to have to tell them over the phone. I even decided, like, when we were sort of in a space where I felt ready to do that after, I don't know, I can't even tell you how long it was there after, half an hour. I don't know how long we were sitting there. I have no concept of time in that, but I do know that when I felt ready, I said, pack your things. We need to go to Nana and Nono. I wanted to tell Rob's parents in person. Like, there's no way I can tell them that over the phone. But we live 45 minutes away. It's not that I had to fly overseas.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think it's easier when they're here. But I really believe in. So my godfather always used to use that sentence. I'm going to use it on you now. Life makes no mistakes. He always said that to me. And at first, I was like, wow, I can tell you, a very long list of mistakes that have been made in my. I was like, no, Marie, life makes no mistakes. And it took me a long time to really fully, wholeheartedly embrace that sentence. And I do now. I really do. And I see that so often in the passing of people that their loved ones say to me, I was there the entire time. In the 5 minutes I leave the room, she passed away. I just can't believe that 5 minutes, or vice versa. I was two days flights away, and I finally got there, and then she passed. I hear these stories all the time. I have a very strong belief that when people, not so much when it's sudden, like an accident or the brain aneurysm or whatever, but when people are leading up to their final hours, that they know exactly when to go. That's my very strong belief with everything that I've witnessed over the years with thousands of people and stories. Um, those ones that were surrounded by loved ones the entire time and they didn't want them there, they waited for the 5 minutes where they weren't there because they didn't want their loved ones to see that. It can be very confronting. This last breath, this all of that can be very confronting. It can be very peaceful. I've experienced it twice now to sit with a person passing, with a very close person passing, and it's confronting. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. It's all of the above. It depends on your beliefs as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that
I
answers
think
your
they've
question, but yeah,
proven that over and over, someone waiting for that phone call, they're
yeah,
hanging on, and then
yeah,
someone that they're special to them calls them, "How are you? I know you're in the hospital," and
yeah,
then they pass,
yeah, yeah,
I just believe it
yeah.
100%. In
Mm,
when people are, like you said, an aneurysm, car accident, something like that, but when people are
yeah,
in the late stages of passing, I think they get things settled and then they
yeah,
pass because it's
yeah.
time. They're ready to go. But
Mm,
you've been so gracious with your time. I know you have other points. I just have two more quick things. What's next for Marie? I mean, yeah, I know
mm,
you've got the three books you've written. You've got three books you've co-written. You do your
yeah,
speaking, your count. You do a
yeah.
lot. You've got the boys.
Mm,
I mean, what do you see next for you? You think you're going to hang on to this? Is there another adventure you're ready to move on to?
mm.
What's Marie going to do?
It's really funny because I've got this really beautiful, beautiful, big visual art diary next to me, and I've literally just started mapping that all out. I'm just going to give
Oh,
you a
that's
very quick
awesome.
review. So I've mapped that
I
out
swear I
last
won't
night
tell. I won't
because
tell.
poor zoom in. No, I'm just kidding. So for me, it was the real, like, there's no secret in there anyway. You'll find it on my website. But for me, there are like really three big groups of things that I focus on. So one is the speaking, one is the coaching, and one is the celebrations of life. So I love, love, love doing celebrations of life for people because every time I do it, um, people say to me afterwards, I have never seen anybody do something like that in a way that you do, because my focus is so much on the life, on the joy, on everything that this person brought into this life rather than, and he passed away and we're also sad that he's gone. I'm like, I don't do that. There are traditional funeral industry businesses where you can go to if you want that, if you want the condolences line, if you want all that, the traditional stuff. I don't do any of that. I am here to party and celebrate that person and show the most beautiful pictures of that person and tell the fun stories about that person, because this is really what it's about. I want to celebrate the person's life. And I have even been flown to Austria to do a celebration of life over there because of the work that I do, because what I do is so different. And the lady over in Austria has been following me for a few years. And then unfortunately, her husband passed away. And she said, I can't think of anybody else than you. And I was fortunate that I actually met him, because when I was in Austria visiting friends and family, I made time to meet her and her husband too, because we had been in contact over the years and, been talking. And so I actually went and met her, and they met my boys, and I met him. And then she said, could you do it? And I fly you over. And I was like, wow, it was such an honor for me, to
Wow.
do that. And she got a lot of grief about that, pardon the pun. A lot of people say, why do you fly that lady in from Australia? And then they came and they were like, I get it now. That was amazing, And I know I'm blowing my own trumpet here, and that's not what it's about.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want people to get the message. It is about celebrating our life now and after. It doesn't matter. It's all about celebrating and embracing life. So, yeah, this is also what my speaking is about. This is also what my coaching is about. Everything I do is about bringing lightness to grief. That's
I
it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to your next phase. I'm looking to see more of
Yeah.
Marie Alessi. That's for sure.
Thank
So,
you.
and again, I know you have something else coming up, but I'm so grateful for your time. But I do
That's
have
all right.
one last question. I
Yeah.
lied in the beginning. I lied. I said I only had one
I'm
question.
shocked.
I'm such a liar. I sure. I have one. I actually had two questions. First one I give you, and that's the what if you could question. But the second question I don't give you. But the second question is if if there's something that you wanted to leave our guests with, there's something,
Mhm.
a saying you've heard, a saying like the one you told us from
Yeah,
your dad, or
yeah,
something, a message you would like to leave with us before
yeah.
we go. What would that message be?
Oh, that's easy. I would just say, please allow your heart to heal because love just wants you to be happy. That's simple. If it was you who had passed and you look down on your loved ones, what would you want them to do? You know, you want them to be happy. That's love. That's love right there.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Because really, there's only one guarantee in life, right? That's
Mm.
we're not getting out of here alive. No one's ever
Yep.
done it. No one's ever going to do it.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
depends how we go. And life is for the living. As corny as
See,
that
I think it
is,
depends on
right?
how we live, not how we go, because
Yeah.
that will then determine how we go. So really just focus on how you live your life right now. You've got the biggest gift right there. So stop worrying about the grief and the death and all of that because it's like take that as a message. And are you living your life the way you want it right now? Because if you're so scared of it, then you're not living your life properly, or joyfully, I should say.
Yeah. I love it. Everybody,
Yeah.
you have been given the gift of spending a little time with Marie Alessi. And
Thank you.
Marie, where can we find all your great stuff? How I'll put it on the bottom of the podcast, but is there any other place
Yeah.
we should go and what do you have coming up and so people can find your wonderfulness?
mariealessi.com. First name, last name.com. That's my website. You can
Easy.
find everything and anything I do on there. You can also find my podcast on there, little sidekick, Unsilence Grief. That's my podcast. And, you can just reach out to me, send me a message. It's actually me answering them. So I really answer those messages personally, not done by a VA. Um, should be careful what I'm saying because maybe one day I'll outsource it. But right now, as you're listening, it'll definitely be me answering that. So yeah,
I love it. We're going to make sure
that's
we
me.
have the links to your website, link to your podcast, have everything on there
Yeah.
so that people can find you because
Thank you.
you're wonderful. It's you're doing such great
Thank you.
work. We light is good and I love your whole approach to this thing. I've talked to a lot of people on this subject and some people love to just keep dragging us down, but light's the way
Mm,
to go for sure, isn't it?
yeah. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for having me and thanks for holding space for me here, Gary. Thank you.
You're welcome, kid. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching another episode of the What If You Could podcast with my friend Marie Alessi. Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Bye.